Hey guys, so the Democrats are absolutely terrified right now, and we need to go over what it is. Right now, you have the Senate Judiciary Committee. I think there's a couple different ones going on at the moment, but what they're essentially doing is they're trying to block a potential 2024 run of Donald Trump. And the reason for this is because if you look at the polling over the last 3 months now, a rematch between Trump and Biden in 2024, Trump is up 5 points in the aggregate. Orange Man Bad is not working anymore. And keep in mind, this is an aggregate polling. So before we say that we just can't trust these polls, there's a few things that we need to look at. One, this is an aggregate poll. This isn't some cherry-pick statistic that I'm using to try to shape a narrative. This is an aggregate. Being an aggregate poll, this includes left-wing polls. CNN's polls are involved in this. And the third thing, and this I think is what has them scared the most, is that going by the previous election cycles, when you compare it to the polling, the GOP has massively outperformed the polls, especially when Trump is on the ticket. So, given that, it's not crazy to think that if Trump is up 5 in the aggregate, he could be up somewhere around 8 points if the election were actually held today. So, I mean, you need to understand how massive that is. Trump was down roughly 7 points going into the election in 2024. 2020. That election came down to 100,000 votes, sometimes even less, depending on what states you want to play around with and flip back and forth from red to blue. And now consider Trump beats Harris and Buttigieg by an even larger amount. So the reason I bring this up is because I see a lot of Republicans right now saying that Trump is finished, we need to move on, he's yesterday's news. That's not what the polling's saying, guys. This has been a trend for 3 months now. And so I think we really need to think a little bit more carefully about what candidate we're going to decide to go with going into 2024. It's not that far off now. As soon as the 2022 elections are finished, you're going to have the presidential campaign start immediately after. So given all this, it's not really all that surprising. People now know that, things like the Hunter Biden laptop was real. If you look at the polling post-election, when the media actually came out and said that the New York Post is correct, you had anywhere from 10% and higher of Biden voters saying they wouldn't have voted for Biden had they known this. So, that in particular reason right there is why we really need to handle big tech censorship. Don't forget about that 10% for the big guy, by the way. But we're going through a period of COVID-tarianism, vax or else, which it looks like the Supreme Court just shot down the OSHA mandate today, by the way. We have 40-year high inflation. Those numbers just came back at 7%. And keep in mind, we're higher now than we were before. We were somewhere around 5-6%. Now we're at 7. They're still saying this is expected to get worse and that we haven't peaked yet. We still have supply shortages. So, I mean, a lot of this has to do with state lockdowns. Not necessarily directly Biden's policy, but Biden and his administration have been pushing for the lockdowns. They've been advocating for it. So, people today are still stuck in Afghanistan. How that's even possible at this point, I don't know. But he's been horrible on foreign policy. So I can go on and on about these failures. I can literally sit here for hours. But for one, I don't have all the time right now, and I need content for other videos. But the biggest one that shocks me is the January 6th narrative. The more people see the video coming out from what happened that day, and the more they believe to think this through, they see the charges coming down, which of all the people charged on for the January 6th riots, it's under 1,000 people. Not a single one of them have been charged with any form of crime related to insurrection. People are starting to see that Trump disavowed what was going on. The January 6th committee is releasing information of conversations that took place. It's showing that Trump had no hand in this. People are ignoring the mainstream media, and they're thinking for themselves. It's absolutely fantastic to see this going on for a change. Tim Pool put this perfectly. If you don't listen to anything that Tim Pool creates, any of his podcasts or anything, you should check him out. Very middle of the road guy, leans left a little bit, very common sense oriented. But I'm going to reiterate his main point because I think more people need to hear it. We know that the media is in cahoots with Biden. That this has been reported on. It's not a conspiracy. The media wants you to believe that January 6th, Trump led a coup against the government. So if you're being intellectually honest, you have to acknowledge that if you believe that statement, Trump is currently more popular having led an insurrection than the Democrat Party is. And 5 points in an aggregate polling for a Republican to be up, that makes this not even close. I just saw a poll yesterday. Independents prefer Trump to Biden right now or the GOP as a whole, I should say, 4-1. That's absolutely huge. The Democrats cannot win an election with those numbers. They cannot. But with the media losing its credibility by the day, and all of the failures of the Biden admin, all Trump has to do in 2024 is come out and say, "I told you so." He can literally run on the "I told you so" ticket, and he will absolutely mop the floor. It's really interesting how, of all people, Trump is likely to become the return to normalcy candidate. How absolutely ironic would that be? Thanks, guys.